Well, hello, everybody, and it's so good to see you. This is Phil Langston, and I am the sidekick to Mr. Chaz over here. Let me just say this about Chaz. As I look over here at him, Chuck Haley, okay? As I look over here, the thing I'm noticing week in and week out is how much more each week his hair looks like Moses. I mean, he's got like Moses hair here, and now he's got this Moses beard. And so I'm actually anticipating a ton, and I mean an absolute ton of wisdom coming down from the mountain today to bless us as we talk about conversational evangelism.
You got it. There's not a problem. I'm pleased to be here with my best friend in the whole world, Will Langford.
Well, it just killed him to say that, didn't it? My name, actually. Well, you know, the last few weeks we've talked about we've talked about conversational evangelism, and we've been comparing it to certain things. Like, for example, week one was, we got to take on the role of the musician, all right? And we talked about having Chris behind us and maybe a soft violin music as we talk. But the one thing about the musician is that they listen carefully, or at least hopefully they should. I imagine if Chris is in choir practice, he's telling the choir, listen to what's happening around you. Listen to one another, You need to be listening to things. And so it's important that as we seek to have these conversations around the gospel, that we are people who listen carefully, trying to understand why it is a person might feel the way they feel. The second week, we went into the role of the artist. And the artist was somebody who tried to bring clarity to things. So I really appreciate that about artists, especially when they're painting pictures or whatever. They're seeking clarity, And so the artist will ask clarifying questions to better understand, not only for themselves, but also so that the person they're talking to can have a better frame of reference as well and have greater clarity. Today, we're going in a little different direction, and we're digging a little deeper. And today, we're talking about the role of the archaeologist.
The archaeologist.
Yes, the archaeologist. So, Chuck, you are our sage, wise sage today. Talk to us a little bit about the archaeologist and what the archaeologist is trying to do and accomplish.
Well, before I get into that, I brought a little gift here, and I want to let you know, Will, do you know what these are?
They're bracelets.
Friendship bracelets, yes.
Oh, friendship bracelets.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a specific
there
type.
There is, yeah, there is. And of course, you and I have known each other. We met as fighter pilots in Nam.
Yeah.
And, no.
Gosh, that was years ago, wasn't it?
We've known each other 10, 11 years, something like that.
Yeah,
now.
the O Club.
Yeah, exactly. And anyways, these are bracelets that you give to the people. You keep one, you give one to your friend, and these this little sign of your bond. So, Will, if you don't mind, can you get that to Richard Castleberry for me?
I am happy to get this to Richard Castleberry.
I apprate that so much.
Richard will treasure this.
That's fantastic.
Not just because you gave it to him, but because you dissed me in the process. He's going to love that. All right, go ahead.
All right, so let's talk about the archaeologist. So it's just kind of threaded together. Let me give you a quick, solid examples of what we're talking. So if I am the musician, I'm listening for notes, and I'm especially listening for sour notes or dissonant notes, because that's where I'm going to start finding issues that they might have spiritually. Then I'm going to come back with the what's after the artist? Oh, the artist is next. And the artist paints pictures, especially a picture of who they really are. You can't go up to somebody and say, hey, this is who I think you are. You ask questions so that then uncovers it for themselves. Yeah. Then we get to the archaeologist. The archaeologist actually drills down to the bedrock and gets those things at the bottom. So with the archaeologist, what are some of the things you wanted me to cover for the archaeologist?
Well, when you think about it, there's several things the archaeologist has to do. I mean, if they're going to play the role of the archaeologist. Let's talk about the first one that the book talked about, and that is trying to determine whether or not the arguments you're hearing are really legitimate questions that a person is asking, or are they throwing up a smoke screen?
Yeah. And that's easy. And the smoke screen ones are kind of easy to spot. They're kind of, they're ones we've heard, did Adam and Eve have a belly button? If God created everything, who created God? Those kind of things. And these are just very, very shallow kind of questions. But then we have those that mean something more, and these are legitimate questions. And usually you can discern that, is this question coming from the heart? If it's coming from the heart, then you're saying, I know where to put this question, and I know how to deal with it, because I know whether or not it's a smokescreen or it's legitimate.
And the smoke screens, sometimes they come across like diversions, don't they?
Yes.
It's kind of like, I'm uncomfortable with this, and so I need to ask this question to kind of get you, you're getting a little close here. And so I'm going to throw this question out there, and sometimes it is a diversion, just trying to move you off topic a little bit.
Yep. You got them uncomfortable. They want to get comfort. They've lost control of the conversation. They want control. So yeah, they're going to throw up a smoke screen.
Okay. The second thing that he said that the archaeologist has to do is determine the nature of the barriers. And basically there are several different types of barriers. Well, actually 3 that they mention in the book. One is an intellectual barrier. The second one is an emotional barrier. And the third one is the volitional barrier. All right, those 3 barriers. So talk a little bit about those,
right,
if you would.
So a middle barrier would be something along the line of, well, I learned this in science class and that contradicts that. And what about carbon dating? And what about the dinosaurs? And what about all this? Those would be more, this is information I have from another source. And then there would be emotional. Understand, as human beings, very often, we make our decisions out of our emotions and then we justify them out of our logic. And that's
a very good point.
Thank you.
That's a great quote. I might make that a Facebook post.
Go ahead and do that. It's not original with me.
Well, you are Moses.
I am Moses. Yeah. I read it on a tablet somewhere.
Okay.
And then of course the volitional. The volitional is the one that just says, I'm not buying it. I'm just not going down that path. And that's the hardest one to get around, because they've already made up their mind. They're not going that way. And there's a chance when you get to that wall that you've stopped. That you can continue to love them, you can continue to minister to them, but there's a good chance that they're not budging. Or if they do budge, their pride might keep them from budging with you. It might take somebody else to do it.
The whole thing about the how you address some of this. Let's start the intellectual one for just a moment. Someone might say, well, I just don't understand how you can take a book that's as old as the Bible is and really say you understand what Jesus was really saying. How many years has that been? What witnesses were there? How do we rely on the trustworthiness of it? That kind of thing. And so the writer was saying one of the things you need to do is you need to turn the burden of proof back on them with some kind of question, maybe a question like this. And this is the example that the writer gave. They said, well, there are many books of the antiquities that how many years old, but yet we don't question the validity or the historicity of those writings at all. So how is it that you can accept that one, but yet not accept the eyewitnesses and the ton of credibility that the scripture has? A person typically hasn't really done their research on the Bible if they're going to just easily dismiss it. They don't realize what a unique and unbelievable book it is, and the way that over and over again, all throughout the centuries, there are people trying to shoot holes in it, but yet they're still not able to do it. There's something something about the Bible that I think these folks just don't take into consideration. So it doesn't hurt to turn the burden of proof on them. Not like a defense attorney or someone like that, or a prosecuting attorney who's trying to nail somebody, but in a loving way where we try to make them think. It's not about trying to beat up anybody. Please don't do that. It's about trying to make them think because we love them.
Right. And a lot of what
Phil?
I almost said Phil. A lot of what Will has just said we're going to cover next week in the bridge building, because with that question, you can also say, well, you're assuming then that a Bible is real, correct? And if you're assuming the Bible is real, what are you assuming about Jesus? Because you use the word Jesus in that question also. Do you believe Jesus was real? Was he a real person? Was he the Son of God? Was he the only begotten Son of God? So there's questions you can ask there that'll help you build that bridge. And that's really, let's keep this in our mind the whole time. The whole goal of being the musician, the artist, the archaeologist, to build those bridges so that then the person you're talking to is receptive to the gospel. So what was another section there?
Another one is uncovering the specific emotional barriers.
Right.
That, people are going to have emotional barriers. And it could be all kinds of things. It could be somebody who was really nasty at church one Sunday when they were a kid, yell at them. And that person's never gotten over it and they've been scarred. That's why we need to be careful. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to someone like that. Well, I got hurt when I was 12 years old, and someone said this to me and my family, and I've never gotten over it. Those kind of things happen a lot more than you think. And so it talks about uncovering specific emotional barriers. Let's hit a few of them real quick. So one thing to do is to have them share their story, Chuck. Just tell you about it.
Yeah.
How do you think that could be beneficial?
I think it'd be great because really we don't know what another person has been through and what they're building the foundation of their emotions or their thoughts on. I can tell you from my personal experience. So I grew up in Ohio, and the culture there is it's kind of cold, not just physically, but it's cold.
Oh, man.
And so you deal with a lot of.
I grew up in Ohio too.
Yes. So you deal with a lot of insults. Well, you were in Southern Ohio.
It's warmer in Southern Ohio.
Yeah. But it's a lot of, insults, and I can't tell you the nicknames that my family has for each other. Nearly every one of them are negative. And it's cringeworthy to hear some of these things. But then they'll, the insults, the picking, the probing, it's kind of like you would expect army buddies to treat each other.
Okay.
And they're treating their loved ones like that. And, there's a place for it, but it ain't at the Thanksgiving table. And I took that mindset that I'd grown up with, moved to Florida, to the backwoods of Florida, where Southern hospitality was at the forefront of everything, and that did not go over well. So I had to completely readjust how I would speak to people and things. And so if you're coming across somebody that appears to be gruff or negative or maybe even hateful, now you've got to dig in a little bit and say, what makes them? What is the emotion that's causing that? And let's also understand this. We are really good about giving up our surface emotion answers. But our basic, deep emotion answers, which we're going to get to next week, it's this week. Our deep emotion answers, those are the ones that are hard to come by. We have pain indicators, and then we have real pain.
Yeah. The book also goes on and shares some other things. So let me just highlight those real quick for you. But sharing their story was the first one. Tell us about your story. What happened? It's always good. They want to know that you care enough to hear and listen. So make sure you do that. Show empathy, okay? Don't be some stone-faced, cringy-faced person as they're telling the story. Show empathy. Actually care, all right? It's not like showing it because you got to fake it. No, actually care about the person that, as you're telling their story, they're telling you something very personal here. Affirm God's love for them. Make sure you do that and affirm that God has a plan and a purpose, and with that there is hope. And then sometimes it doesn't hurt to apologize for what they experienced. There have been many times where I've had to sit down and say, I am so sorry for what you experienced. And the truth is they need to hear that. And something, we need to say it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Encourage them to not allow negative experiences in the past at church or with religious people to keep them from really seeking to have a relationship with God. And then finally, pray that God would do something supernatural in their life. Those are just some things that you can do and should do as you're dealing with someone who's got some emotional barriers. And let me tell you, they are out there. And so let's take that into consideration. Read that section of this chapter, a little bit later and make some mental notes about that. Chuck, let's move on to number 4. And he said, uncover questions or concerns behind people's questions. So I guess as we would say around here sometimes, the thing really isn't about the thing. That sometimes people have questions, but the initial questions aren't really what's bothering them. There's something else. And so the archaeologist has to dig a little deeper and discover that.
So that'd be kind of like what we were just saying. There are pain indicators and there's real pain. And let's go back 2 steps, and where we're getting that from is from our very first questions, listening for sour notes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Now you're listening for sour notes. Now when you're painting that picture of them, you're including those discrepancies or difficulties or pain, and now you're getting over to the archaeologist, and this is where you open up the pain. It's really good to ask questions something like, well, tell me more about that. Well, where did that come from? What have you been doing about that? Has that helped fix anything? Yes? No? Well, what do you think will fix that? And just keep digging and digging until you find out what is that one thing that's really the barrier to them coming to know Christ. Now you get the volitional guy. These questions, they might go so far, but if he's still just saying, no, absolutely, I want nothing to do with it, you still have in your arsenal love, peace, joy, all the fruit of the Spirit that you can pour out on him. And that's really what you're going to have to do in order to get him to that next step, to come to places. Here is the one reason why I won't listen to the plan of salvation, to your witness. You got to live it out.
Chuck, do you have a story? I mean, maybe this is a good time for story hour with us, because you kind of in that response, which was brilliant, by the way.
Oh.
It's so Moses-like.
Good brain.
You kind of wrapped up the last 3 points in that a little bit. You touched on things that could connect to each one of these, whether it's uncovering their biggest barrier or uncovering motivational factors, or even you talked about the volitional factor. That's really just not, what it is. Can you recall a time when you were sharing your faith and someone responded to you in a way that, after talking with them, you realized that the objection that they had really wasn't the initial objection stated? That something else came out in the conversation that helped you to really say, yeah, I get this. This is, the thing wasn't the thing.
The thing wasn't the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife and I, one of my sons and his good friend, were out camping, and people moved in right next door, and we started talking to them. And sitting around the campfire one night, the subject of religion came up. I asked him, do you have any spiritual conversations with your kids? And to my surprise, she said, and these are young teens, almost preteens. He says, well, my daughter is a witch. I go, okay, don't react, just go with it. Okay. And says, but our son, no, we really haven't talked to him about anything like that. We're going to wait till he grows up. And when he grows up, he'll make his own decisions. And I thought for just a second, and I'm like, your kids have teeth, right? Well, of course they have teeth. Do they brush their teeth? Yeah. Why? Didn't you just leave the toothpaste and the toothbrush on the bathroom counter, and then when they wanted to brush their teeth, they could do it? Maybe when they grew up, they figured out that they didn't want stinky breath or something. Why did you teach them to do this from a young age? And they knew exactly where I was going with this. It was not too hard to draw those points together. I said, then, if teeth are temporary and you're willing to take such good care of those, but the soul is eternal, why should you not take even better care of that? Sorry. And the answer, coming back to that, it was just, we think that it's best the way that we raise our kids. And at that point, they had made that volitional statement. So we did exactly what we're reading here in the book. We continued to hang out with them. They were there another 4 days or so. Hang out with them, go to the beach with them, build a fire with them on the beach. That's back when you could build a fire on the beach. And just show them compassion and love. And then if a meal came about, I would ask, may I pray for this? And may I pray for you? And we did. And so that's my memory of the time when I had a barrier.
The most memorable one for me was probably about, it's almost 20 years ago now. Can you believe I can remember 20 years ago?
I can only remember 20 years ago. I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
Okay. Well, anyway, I was talking to a gentleman up in Westchester, Ohio, and he was coming at me right and left with questions that he had about the validity of Scripture. I mean, he just kept coming at me. Well, how do you know this about Jesus and all that? Through the end of the conversation, he started to soften, believe it or not. But he looked right at me. He said, I just will not do this. I cannot do this. Well, why not? You know what it came down to? He didn't want to have to change his living arrangements. He felt like that his lifestyle and where he was in life and who he was doing life with at the time was something that he would have to give up. And he just said, I'm not willing to do it. So here it is, a man facing the truth of the gospel, understanding that eternity hangs in the balance and that Jesus is the way, the truth. I understood all that and agreed with it. Still looked at me and said, I'm sorry, that's not worth it because of the temporary changes I'm going to have to make right now and the problem it would make in my life. He eventually did come to Christ. It was like 6 months later. He did come to Christ and he did make those changes. And he became amazing friend, to be honest with you. But it breaks my heart sometimes, the things that we are with white knuckles clinging on to that we won't give up because for volitional reasons. It really had nothing to do with science. It really had nothing to do with his trustworthiness of Scripture. It really had nothing to do with what he believed about Jesus. He just said volitionally, I'm not willing to let go and make this commitment over temporary things in my life right now. So, well, Chuck, we're going to wrap this up here. Is there any final thoughts you have on this chapter with the archaeologist?
I would say that the archaeologist is probably one of the more important listening skills. You've got those probing questions, you've got those clarifying questions, and then you have those foundational questions that really gets to the matter of what is it that is keeping you, what barrier is there that holds you back from accepting Christ.
Well, on behalf of Chaz, Chuck Haley, and Phil Langston, I am so glad that you joined us this week. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And we'll be here talking about another character that you need to take note of if you're going to grow in your ability to have conversations about evangelism.
Well, I want you to know that I'm also known as the ace of base.
The ace of base.
You know who calls me that? You know who calls me that? Just me. I'm the only one. That's
Right.
it.
Well, on behalf of the ace of base and Phil Langston, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.